Hi, my name is Brett Malley.
Hi, and I'm Jason Crump.
I'm a filmmaker, author, and Photoshop master.
I'm a lighting specialist, and I've been a photographer for about 200 years now. I age well. It's a ginger thing.
So today we're going to talk about lighting, photography, and Photoshop compositing.
In the concept shot that we're working on today, we have two characters played by the same model. There's going to be two separate types of light sources coming in there. One's going to be from the moon, which is going to have one color temperature. The other is going to be from a lantern that one of the characters is going to be holding, which will have a completely different color temperature to it. So before we start talking and getting into the actual setup and shooting, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the gear that we're going to be using today. Put that down. Freaking me out.
All right, so what gear are we using? What do we have here?
Today what we're going to be using is a Photex Mitros Plus with a flash bender wrapped around it for a snoot. This light is going to provide the straight white light for the rim light, which we're going to have set up on a high stand in the back. That'll be coming from the moon in the final composited image.
So that's the moon.
This is going to be the moon. And the reason we're using a longer snoot on it here is so that we can keep that light from spilling all over the place. Without it in a big white environment like this, that light's going to bounce and you're going to get a lot less of an intense rim light without it.
So we got moon. What else do we have?
We got for the lantern that we're going to be using this LumaPro LP180 with a Odin receiver on it.
What does that mean?
What that means is that this is a straight manual flash. We're going to put it in this Westcott Rapid box, and we're going to put this half CTO warming gel on it to create the nice warm light for the lantern. So we're going to control all of it with the Odin controller from Photex as well. And the neat thing about this, in conjunction with these lights here, especially the moon when it's up high, because we're gonna have it like 10 feet up in the air aiming down at everybody, is that in order to make any power adjustment changes on here, we can just do it straight from the camera itself. And we don't have to lower it down or go up a ladder or anything like that. So that's this lazy man's favorite toy right there.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, and then we've got our vicious little props for all sorts of fun and chaos that'll be happening in the shot. So that's roughly the gear that we're going to be using, along with Brett's sword, for the shot today. So let's go talk about the shoot. Let's go shoot. Let's set it up and go.
Here we go.
All right.
Even though we already shot it?
Well, they don't need to know that. Okay, so we've got everything set up now, and I just want to go over the lighting setup here really quick. What we have is for our main light is coming off from the side over here, and it's got a warm gel on it. It's a half-cut CTO, and that's going to be simulating the light coming from the lantern that our model Heather is holding right over there, okay? For our moonlight, we've got a snooted speed light up top there that's going to give her a really nice bright cool light to contrast with the warm light from the lantern, so it looks like it's a full moon coming in, and in post-production Brett's going to throw a moon in there, so then that's going to be the light that's coming from, and it's got a nice cut coming through off of her costuming and everything like that. So we've done a couple of shots with it, and we had her in the crouched pose, which she'll demonstrate for you right now. Okay, so but we wanted to show a little bit more action and movement in that shot. So what we did is we had her start from the standing position, and then she's gonna spin around and come down into that pose. And then I get the shot once her cloak and dress are sort of billowing and moving around a little bit. So it's that Wonder Woman spin coming down is what it really kind of is. So we're gonna grab a couple of frames of that real quick, and you can see what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3, spin. Perfect. That's awesome. I really like that one. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the gear that we're using in here right now to get these effects that we're going for. We have, for our main light, I've got a Westcott Rapid box set up with LumaPro LP180, okay? The gel that's in there is from Rogue Imaging. They got these sweet little gel sets, and so it's super easy to put together. We're triggering both of the lights with the Photex Odin system right now. And the moonlight up in the back is a Photex Mitros Plus, so that's got the transceiver for the trigger built into it, and I can remote control it with the Odin on top of my camera unit. So once you get a highlight like that up in position, it's so much easier to be able to go to the unit on top of your camera when it's mounted and say, okay, I'm gonna dial down this power, because I've adjusted it many times just to get that right amount of light coming into it. To help control that light, since it's so high up and behind everything, and I'm usually shooting from a lower perspective, to keep that light from going and giving me a lens flare on there, what I did is I took a flash bender by Rogue and I wrapped it around it as a snoot. So what that's going to do is that's going to take that light, and instead of broadcasting it out everywhere, it's going to focus it right onto your subject so that you get that nice highlight on the head and the shoulders, and in this instance when she's spinning along the edge of the cape. So that's some of the equipment that we're using here on the shoot to get what we're going for. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to tear down this main light over here, and we're going to get something really super dark and sinister. Probably going to just primarily use the moonlight. We're going to keep that in that same position, but we're going to take the gel off of the rapid box and shoot that a little bit whiter so that it's more of a matching light, so that it's sort of a shadowy figure coming out. Now we're going to use the it's going to be the same model, Heather, and she's going to be wearing the same cloak as before.
Now we get to the Photoshop portion, which is the best part.
I heard that.
Right. We're going to break this down step by step. So the Spinal Composite is made of 7 main sections, each with their own adjustments and effects, as you can see in this wicked visual.
What is this, the holodeck?
Nerd.
Fair enough.
So the first step is to go through and rate your images, and then once you have them rated, you can do stars 1 through 5 by holding down Command and then numbers 1 through 5. It's on a Mac. It's on a PC. Hold down Control instead. PC and Mac. And then after that, it's getting it all the ones that you really like. So in this case, I like this one where there was the dagger being held imminently and sort of the cloak was out in just the right way, and then the other one where she was twirling. There's that shot that you got, that last one that worked really well.
Oh, okay.
So I starred those and I brought them into Photoshop, as you can see here. And then from there, I brought them to the ACR, which is the Adobe Camera Raw editor. From there, since they're all shot in RAW, they're NEFs because of Nikon RAW.
Which is the good RAW.
All right, go back to the holodeck. So with RAW, then you can edit the color temperature. So I really wanted it to be super blue for that moon, right? And I wanted that that lantern to be more orange, so I accentuated that using Camera Raw.
And that's just in the white balance, right? Or the temperature?
So
Which one did you do that in?
So I did a couple of things. So the first thing I did was change the temperature to make it super cool, so that way we get that moon super cool. And then I also changed the saturation. So right now I'm going back and forth between what was shot and then what I changed it to. So saturation increased because there was a little bit of warmth on there, and then I increased the coolness of it as well. So it has both. So any warmth that was also increased with saturation, and the cools are increased.
And that's one of those things that I think in this type of a context is better to do in post-production as opposed to doing it as you're shooting. If you use like an auto white balance as you're shooting, you get that same baseline consistency, and then when you take it into Photoshop like Brett's doing here, then you can go ahead and change those colors in post.
So as long as you can get 2 different colors, one more or less cool, one a little bit warmer, then you can do virtually anything once you're in Camera Raw with it.
Right.
And then in Photoshop, anything. And then, okay, anyways. For step 3 in this tutorial, I use this thing called collection. So you can see over on the left, to the right, the tab to the right of filters, I have this thing called collections where I basically took all my archive and I was able to throw each one into basically a folder where it doesn't move anything, but it adds it to, let's say, trees. And so when I click on that tree collections, it's all in their original folders, but it will tag them and put them all together in one quick filter for me, one search. So my archive, where I just have thousands and thousands of pictures that I've taken, I can quickly pull up, hey, I need some rocks or I need some mountains. So I have all those set up as different different pieces of collections in my archive.
So that's one of those moments where it's really good to make sure that you have your digital archive is well organized.
Yeah, so keeping a digital archive super well organized, very helpful, and collections is a fantastic way to do that. So again, over on the left hand side of Bridge, when you're in Bridge and it's set up under Essentials, you have your filters, and then to the right of that you have collections. So I can add a collection of trees, right? If I have great trees, or in this case mountains, and I can have stars, or I can have rocks, and those are all different collections. So that way when I have something imagined like this, I can say, oh, I'm gonna need a rock for the foreground. Click on rocks, pulls up rocks, and I can drag in just the right one for that section. Step 4 is bringing in the main pieces together, right? This is where you have a jigsaw more or less, and you can be collecting it all into one big composite. So it's really important to organize as you go. So for me, especially in the case of this composite, I brought in the main sort of pieces to it, and then from there I needed to organize them based on depth. So basically the closer something is to our point of view of where it looks like we are shooting this image, the higher it needs to be in the stack of layers, right? So layer order matters. So again, based on depth, the closest to us needs to be higher in the stack. The furthest behind, in this case the stars, needs to be at the lowest, the very bottom of that stack. So I organize everything when I first started up, so I get all the main folders, group folders, created over there, and then I start dropping in the pieces as I'm working. That way I can immediately start with the right depth, which is really important. It's good to work with smart objects. Smart objects are great because they keep it non-destructive. Then you can scale, you can do all these transform edits without destroying the original. Usually if you have a raster image and scale it way down, you change your mind, oh wait, I want it way back up, then it's going to be completely pixelated and just be horrible. So you turn it into a smart object first, and you can scale back and forth as much as you want, and it all basically embeds it inside that Photoshop file, which is a great non-destructive workflow. So I immediately, once I get my various images in there, if they're not already brought in as smart objects, you can right click on the layer, do convert to smart object, and then bam, it's a smart object. And you can notice because it has a little tiny little smart object symbol in the lower right hand corner of the thumbnail in that layer itself.
So when you're doing that scaling and moving, you're using the move tool primarily, right?
Yeah, so the way I use the move tool is I always, and this is my preference, I'm gonna convert everyone else out there, I use show transform controls. This little tiny button is so important because I don't like to do Command T or Control T if you're on a PC. It's great because I can even hit V for the move tool and just switch over and start moving and transforming and doing all these things. Basically the move tool turns into a Swiss Army knife of all these hidden transform features when you have that little toggle show transform controls selected, and it's up in the options bar. So by doing that, I can stretch it and do all sorts of things. Once I get it scaled and it's in position more or less, doesn't have to be perfect, from there I do a selection and then a mask, and I do that for each of the main segments. In this case there's 7, right? 7 pieces.
Was that with the smart selection tool?
Quick selection
Quick
tool.
selection tool,
Yes.
that's what I meant, not smart, that's quick.
Yeah. It is quick. Once you get a pretty decent selection, you can then do Refine Edge up in the options bar. And Refine Edge is great because then I can add a little bit of a feathering to it. So without feathering, it looks really cookie cutter. It looks like just a crappy collage. So we want to make it a little more seamless. So we want to...
Way to keep it classy.
I know, that's true.
Gotcha.
You're welcome, San Diego. So with that, I was able to...
Anchorman. Sorry, that was genius. That was really good.
So I'm able to add a little tiny feathering to it, so that way it doesn't look too sharp and too cut out. once I do the selection for, let's say, the rocks, then I'm going to do that for all the other objects as well. So that way they all have the same feathering. They all look cohesive once they're put together. So I do the same selection, just like for the model. Then I refine that edge. In the model's case, I use the Refine Radius tool that's built in with the Refine Edge, and I can paint around some of the hair, and it will grab some of those hairs that are flying around. But in general, I get all the selections going. So I did it for the rocks that are closest to us, the model, which is the next closest thing. Then we have the cliff, which is the next closest thing after that. And then I did it finally for the assassin that's flying there. Well, that's a separate story. We'll get to the assassin. And then we have a moon, separate story as well. But then the mountains.
Right. One thing I love about masks in Photoshop is that you can always go back in and just use the paintbrush tool and make any manual kind of adjustments that you want or need to make at that point in time, which with the various different types of selection tools are really great, and they do an awesome job. But sometimes you just want to go in and say, like, no, I want this little nubbin right here. Yeah. Or I don't want that nubbin.
Yeah, sometimes you miss it. So actually, I did that within this one, where I get a pretty good selection, right? As best as I can, but it's not always going to be absolutely perfect. So that's what's great. Once you turn it into a mask, it's a non-destructive workflow where you can paint in a little bit more, paint in less, using black, right, to erase. White brings it back. So it's a really good non-destructive way to do it. So I did that for all 7 main layers, right? Make sure they all have the right look and cohesion based on the depth. So step 7 is adding the assassin. This is where I'm going to duplicate the layer before working on it, because otherwise it's going to not work very well with the mask as a smart object while I'm applying the Liquify filter. So it's really important to rasterize it first, and to do that I need a copy of it, so that way I can still work in a non-destructive workflow. Yes, in the front.
Okay, so you duplicated the assassin layer.
Yes.
And then you did that so that you could apply the Liquify effect to it. And why did you do that?
Yeah, so Liquify can be really great if you want to alter the shape, let's say, of this cloak. So in this case, we needed to be a little more flowy. You needed to be like her flying off of a cliff. We had constraints where we're at, and we didn't want her to fall and stab herself. So I knew that we could use Liquify afterwards and make it flow however we want. And I could change around the inside of the actual subject that we're seeing, because I was just going to make that all dark. So I just needed a silhouette. So Liquify is perfect for changing something like a silhouette.
Oh, okay. So that you used the Liquify tool to give it that additional flow in post. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Holy cow! Look at that. I didn't realize how much until I watched you do it that you moved the shape of the cloak. That's pretty rad. I love the Liquify tool. Yeah.
The reason why you would want to rasterize it is because we're going to apply a mask after the fact. So if we apply a mask beforehand and we do Liquify, it's not going to move that mask with it appropriately. So it's important to rasterize it first, do Liquify, right, all is on a copy, and then from there do the selection and the mask. So the next step is creating an effects folder. So with this effects folders, I can make things feel a little more, has better continuity, make things feel a little more cohesive. In this case, I wanted to make everything feel like it's nighttime. So I needed a blue, so I picked a blue, and I spilled with the bucket, hit G for the bucket tool, spill, and then I changed the blending mode. Hue didn't look right, so I changed it to color. Yeah, sometimes you have to play back and forth. And then usually I bring down the opacity. In this case, around 17%, or 41% in this case, was able to make things feel a little bit more blue. But this was just a starting point of what I wanted it to begin looking like, where I was going to bring in this blue filter that I'm going to call the blue filter, and apply it to each individual layer within each group, within each section. So basically I created an effects folder that's going to have overall continuity that I can play with and experiment with, but then I'm going to copy this blue filter and apply it to each section, each of the 7 sections individually. That way they all have that customized blue look. Because you may notice that some are more blue than others already, and some are not. So you can see how I copy it, and I clip it. That's a really important thing. I don't want it to affect everything beneath it once I start applying it to the individual sections. I want to make sure that it is clipped to that one piece. So in this case, the foreground and that the cliffs or just the mountains, then I can adjust the saturation, adjust the opacity of that layer as needed, right, to taste.
And that's that little button in the, was that the properties menu?
Yeah, so you could, to clip it?
Yeah, to clip it.
So you can hold down Alt/Option, right, depending if it's on a Mac or a PC, or PC and then a Mac, holding down Option and clicking between those two layers. So if you have the new layer that's all blue, you hold down Option or Alt and click between that and the layer directly beneath it, and it will clip it. There's a shortcut to it, but I'm forgetting it.
Something with the chicken on a Tuesday. I don't remember. I just remember it's that button right there.
That's if it's a curves. That's if it's
that's curves, but in the properties menu of the layer.
Right, but this one,
the adjustment layer.
Since there are layers, it's not an adjustment. The blue isn't.
Oh, see, that's why I'm not the Photoshop guy.
There we go. But that was a good observation. So if it's a curves, and I'm doing the same thing for getting the lights and darks to match, which actually brings me to another step, perhaps. So we have blue at 17% opacity, clipped to each of the main layers, and then from there I added on I added on some curves adjustments to match the lights and darks of each of those individual layers and try to get them to feel a little more
cohesive
on there for sure.
Non-collagey?
Non-collagey. That's the technical term.
Collagey.
Yeah, the more I can get it non-collagey, the better in my book.
It's an industry term. If you're not familiar with it, don't feel bad. It's just one of those things that people in the know.
Yeah.
We got it. It's fine.
I know. You can see as I'm going that I'm creating subfolders. In the case of I wanted to create a glow for the lantern, I created a lantern subfolder within my Traveler folder. So I have a group folder for the Traveler where all those different effects and layers are being thrown in. Then I have a lantern subfolder. In this case, it has I just use a very what I call soft and fuzzy brush, right? Just sort of the standard default. Make sure hardness is all the way down to the left. And then I painted with a very pale, very light yellow, and that gets the basic glow. And I painted the inside a little more white, so that very brightest part on there. But you get something really glare. I'm not really paying attention too much to color at first, because then I can do that after the fact. So I get a nice glow. I'll speed this up here.
And that was all on a blank layer, right?
All on a new blank layer.
Okay.
And then I create another blank layer that's going to control the color, where I change the blend mode of this new layer that's above that glary thing to color. And then it looks like I brought its opacity down to about 41%. Then I can color everything that's on there and make it nice and sort of goldeny and glowy.
And that's the neat thing about Photoshop, especially on like these types of layers when you're doing these effects, is that you can always overdo it and then grab the opacity and pull it down.
Yeah, actually it's a really good suggestion. So always overdo your effect to see what it's doing, see if it's affecting the places that you want it to affect, and then pull it back to what feels right in adjustments. Kind of like tuning a guitar, you kind of make it too sharp and then a little too flat, and you find that sweet spot right in between.
You just dial it into taste. And that's I find that I do that all the time when I'm doing any type of Photoshop edit on like the portraits and stuff like that I normally do, is that I'll just take it and I'll say like, oh, okay, so this is, the eyes are super wet, and then just dial it down.
Right. Yeah.
Make it
glowing.
So it almost doesn't exist, and then start to bring it up a little bit again.
Yep. Find the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So the next step is creating the moon. So to create the moon, I use two different textures. So I use this really dingy, nasty looking rust metal texture.
The cookie tray?
That's not my cookie tray.
Okay.
Is that your cookie tray? It might be. Right?
I'm not saying anything because
All right.
my wife will hurt.
So I went into his house and took a picture of his cookie tray, and here it is. So we have my cookie tray, which isn't that much better. Anyways, yeah, this is some rust I found out, I think, at my mom's place, actually.
You're in trouble.
It's true. All right, so found some great rust. Always take pictures of textures. You never know when they might turn into a moon. It's good to know.
Yep.
So I got the Elliptical Marquee tool, and I held down Shift to constrain the properties, so it got a perfect circle, and no kind of oblong, weird-looking moon.
That's my for those selection tools.
Yeah.
Holding down that Shift key is my favorite thing in all the world.
Shift is good. Yep.
Shift and then like the space bar so you can move it around as you're selecting.
Those are good tips as
Woo!
well. Thank you. All right.
Sorry.
Trade chairs?
I'm just
It's good.
talking monkey at this point in time. It's the little things that make me happy.
It's true. sleep-deprived parents.
Yes.
That's just how it goes. So I used a texture, Elliptical, made a copy of that, brought it into its own blank new layer. That way it takes up just the amount of space that I wanted to. Then I made another selection similar to the first, only with a different metal texture. Drag that across.
At some point.
Whatever I
There you go.
to it.
Good job.
Apparently I was really picky with the placement.
Wait, you picky with Photoshop?
No.
How dare you, sir?
No wonder this thing took 2 hours.
Yeah, I can see why. No, I need to be 4 pixels to the right.
I didn't have that dot in there. That,
Yeah,
that could
it's
have
like,
been a
oh no,
asteroid.
I can't. No, that's unacceptable.
So when I first brought it in here, clearly it was too large. So I needed to shrink it down. I'm doing that by holding down
Shift.
your favorite.
Yeah.
And so you notice it wasn't quite perfect, so I scaled it to fit. I'm not making these into smart objects. In this case, if you want to work completely non-destructive, you could probably bring this whole thing in as a smart object, because that's brilliant. But in this case, I was pretty confident that I was going to get a moon that I wanted that I can just copy and paste. So, all right. So then, you may have missed that. I just spherized it. So I went to filter, and then I went down to distort, and then spherize all the way to 100%. And that enabled me to create that very, round moon-like substance. And then I played around with some of the blending modes. Some that did not work, right?
No.
Even though I know Photoshop and I know just about what the blending modes do, you never know exactly what's going to happen, because it all depends on the images that you're working with, right? If you're working with a lighter image and it has darker components, or vice versa. So it's always good to play. Have digital courage. Play around with your blending modes.
Absolutely.
And shift.
Shift.
It's always good. Well, it doesn't help you with blending modes. So I played around with that, and let's see the final result.
Well, it can, but I mean, it doesn't do anything for you.
All right, so here we go. So the final blending mode that I found that was really good was not Pinlight,
Something that made it look like Krypton.
not Difference. Now I'm just getting desperate. I'm like, one of these has to work.
Oh dear
there
God,
we go.
please.
So linear dodge in this case worked really well to create a sort of moon-like look. And don't worry about the color; it's not really made of cheese. It will be disgusting cheese. Yeah. So I found linear dodge, and that worked quite well on a really dark, rusty layer to make sure it sort of burned through just enough. And then from there, I selected the whole thing. You do Command A.
Yep.
Works very well. And I just pasted it right in. Command V onto its own layer.
Bong.
Somewhere,
eventually.
Oh, hey, look at that. There's
Oh,
one
did you make a
called Moon.
folder?
There's already a folder.
Oh, look at that.
I'm
You made a
just that
folder.
organized.
Yeah.
All right, so I paste the moon in there.
Oh,
but
you
of
can't
course,
see it.
Of course, it's in the wrong spot.
There you go.
There, the moon has risen.
Good job.
Thank you. So-
Which makes a really rad silhouette for the assassin.
Yes, so we knew that we wanted the moon somewhere in the back there, but doing a straight up silhouette, yeah, it's a little cliche, but it popped, right?
Yeah, no,
So,
that really works.
It worked for this. We're going all out with
Yeah. I still don't like where you put the moon, but that's fine.
the placement. A little to the right.
No, to the
No,
left.
to the
Needs to go to the left. But that's just me.
Okay, and I got a
That,
little bit
whatever.
smaller there.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm
we'll
a
have you do
tool.
the next one.
Okay, I'll do the next one. And
So-
it'll look like a straight up collage from like kindergarten.
Oh, unacceptable.
Rounded scissors and everything.
But at least you held the shift key.
Yes, I'll hold the shift key, but I'll cut everything out manually and paste it together with, Scotch tape. So how'd you get that color for that moon?
So yeah, get that. So the color is the exact same color effect that I was doing for all the other layers, and so I can copy it with holding down Option or
Okay.
Alt if you're on a PC. You hold it down while clicking the actual thumbnail of the layer and drag it right above, in this case, the moon layer, and then you clip it to it. But you can make as many copies as you want. It's still going to retain the amount of opacity. In this case, I think 17% for most of these, and it will still look blue. And you can mask it or do whatever you want. It will copy everything. Yes. Question?
Okay, so if you do that, if you copy that blue layer that you just did, if you put it above a folder, will it affect everything in the folder as well?
In the latest versions of Photoshop, yes.
Okay, cool.
So in CC, if you want it to affect everything in that folder, you can clip to the folder. Organizationally, it gets a little confusing. So what I might do is, rather than put it directly above that folder, and since it indents, it might look like it's in the folder above it. So what I often do is I'll make another folder titled with the same title, and then that's all in one big folder where it has the clipped blue layer clipped to that whole folder within that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So it sort of indents
Okay,
it, and visually it keeps you organized a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I can understand.
Because you can keep doing many groups, but you don't want to get too far, because then you can't see them and read them, and what's the point of that? Well, the next step is getting everything exactly into position, so it's just a quick finessing. I'll sort of speed through this, getting everything in the right spot there. Next is adding the atmosphere, right? Because it still looks a little bit funky with that. You can see the mountains, how they're kind of faded, but the stars aren't, right? That wouldn't happen. Typically, whatever's furthest behind has the most atmosphere gathered with it, right? Built up atmosphere. So it was really important to build it up. So I did the haze / atmosphere in 2 different sections. So I made a group folder that was directly in front of the stars, but behind the mountains, so that to get an appropriate amount of haze just for that background to blend in with the mountains. Then I added another one in front of the mountains, so higher in the stack, but behind that cliff and behind everything else, but in front of the mountains, that would get more haze.
So that you could build up the atmospheric perspective?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the atmospheric perspective had to be built up in 2 ways. One, there was none behind the mountains, so the stars needed a lot more atmospheric perspective.
Right.
And then also we needed to build it up and make it more mysterious. You do your whistling thing. There we go. Around the subject, right, and building a little more sort of scary situation around that.
Wahaha.
So we'll fast forward through all that. There we go. And then also adding a little bit on the cliff as well. One thing that I wanted to start playing with was how cutout and collage-y, I said it, there we go, how collage-y that the assassin was. So I wanted to make him a little more mystical, rip off some Harry Potter movies, you know, something along those lines.
Is that a Dementor? Is that what you're saying?
Sort of a little Dementor / one of the Death Eater fly guys.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Somewhere in there, between there. So I wanted to, you know, reminiscent of pop culture, something evil, it's about to kill you.
Right. Okay. But what's also really cool about this is the way that you use the Liquify tool and all your other little Photoshoppy tricks is that you made a complete distinction between the Traveler and the Assassin, even though they're the same model.
Yes, so those were both the same model. So one of the main things that I did to make a large visual difference between the Traveler and the Assassin was by playing with a mask and brushing in exactly how it was going to be all sort of smoky and
atmospheric-y. To make it non-collage-y.
Death Eatery.
Death Eatery? Ooh. That sounds like a cool little pub, Death Eatery.
I would go there on Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely.
/ Harry Potter marathon.
Now I want a beer and a piece of pizza. It's a Death Eatery.
I don't drink. So I used this brush and I did 2 things with it. So one is I erased a little bit of that group folder of the assassin itself. So everything that was part of the assassin, I erased it with the brush itself I created from a splatter brush that had a scattering effect on it, and you have to click in multi-axis, so it's scattering everywhere, and a fairly large, maybe 230%, something that's pretty.
You're nerding out.
I did 2 different things to create the right sort of glowy warmth coming from that lantern and reflecting off that rock. So one, I did a layer that was just color that straight up just made it very orangey. Technical term there? Orangey. And later on I adjusted it to look a little bit more appropriate and sink it in. But at first I just get the general glow, so I can tell it's glow, and then I change the effect later on there.
And that's just painting on a blank layer.
Blank new layer, change the blending mode to color, and you can play around between color and hue.
Oh,
so
okay. That makes sense.
Going back and forth between those 2. So lastly, finally, right, it's been going on for a while, we got to the final color adjustments and the curves that give the right sort of eye flow and make us have the right feeling in general. So I went back up to my effects folder, and this is where I created more sort of global adjustments with the global curves, and then I mask it out so it's just in the right places. Then I do a little bit more lighting so I can warm some parts up and then cool down other parts. And I just do this for typically all my composites, right? Do get everything syncing pretty well, getting it up so it has good cohesion. It has good continuity, and then I really finesse it and get everything really syncing and looking quite nice with, if I don't say so myself.
With one global adjustment.
With one global
everything.
adjustment.
Okay.
Yep, so I do a group folder, right? The effects folder that's above everything, and then I can paint in, oh, this needs to be a little more cold here, so I'll typically make a new blank layer, change it to color, spill blue for the cool, and I'll have it affect everything, right? Bring it down to maybe 21% in this case, then mask it out, right? So I don't want it to make the subject more blue. It was really good to have that glow coming off of that lantern, so I masked out that area. So just made everything else super cool. All right. Everything else is really cooled down except for that one little area.
And then you added a final little vignette over
so
everything here?
I did some vignettes straight up on normal blending mode, just darkened it down a little bit. Typically, I'll also add in an additional layer that's changed to overlay, where I can dodge and burn non-destructively, right? So
which you taught me to do, actually.
Yeah, there we
which
go.
I love.
Yes, I teach everyone. So yeah, non-destructive dodge and burning. You create a blank new layer, change its blending mode to overlay, and you can paint with black to darken down. Very low opacity. Don't go overboard. It gets a little dramatic very quickly. Then you can also paint with white to lighten it up.
Again, to interject, that's one of those moments, though, if you over dodge and over burn, that you can just adjust the opacity.
That's true.
On the layer. So if you're going to dodge and burn, have one layer for dodging, one layer for burning, and then you can adjust those.
That's a good idea. I'll typically go, shadows. I'll call one shadows and one highlights, and I'll just sort of paint in that. One thing though is that rather than adjusting the opacity as you brush and doing the amount of flow and opacity manually that way as you're going along, is once you adjust the whole layer, it's going to do all the other ones in proportion too. So it's good to do it right up front with the right opacity and flow, the right sort of pressure. Right. But then if everything's looking a little overboard, you can always bring everything back.
Yeah.
But it's great to have those non-destructive options, the opacity in the whole layer.
Make it less collagey.
Less collagey. Shift it.
Shift it good.
Okay, so next, she had fantastic purple hair, which didn't quite work exactly for the shot that we're going for, so I had to change the color of her hair. So in this case, I created a new layer and changed its blending mode to hue, and picked more of a browny, bad-looking color.
Brownie.
I made it a little more blue in the end, but just to get something so it didn't look quite as purple. And then from there, I added the last little effects. It's really important for eye flow. The idea behind this is I wanted people's eyes to go to that lantern and look at that subject and then see that moon, or vice versa, where you get that play in between them, then the rocks. So really bringing in almost like a little spiral. Finally, after applying effects and getting the right sort of vignette and general eye flow with some parts lighter and darker than others, I wanted a little bit more haze, a little more glow around that moon. It didn't feel glowy enough. There's another one. Glowy. And felt a little too collagey. So we needed to make a little more glow around the moon. So I went to that moon layer and then beneath the moon layer. So I wanted to apply it behind it as well as in front of it. So if you paint in front of something that has little textures, it's going to obscure it and make it feel a little washed out. In order to keep that same glow, you can put it beneath the actual object itself, and it'll feel very glowy. There we go.
Glowy collagey. Yeah.
So I added a little bit of glow / glare. There we go.
There you go. Glare.
Glary.
It's not an Aussie word.
Add a little more glare to the moon. And then finally, it's really a good idea to refresh your eye, especially when you've been working on it for almost 2 hours, as in this case, to flip it around, to refresh your eyes, because you get eye fatigue. Kind of like in the recording studio, you get ear fatigue, where your ears just stop hearing objectively. Your eyes do something very similar. What I do is I do Command A for select all, and I do Command Shift C to copy and merge everything, and that's going to basically take a snapshot or a core sample of all the layers that are visible. Then I do Command V for paste, and I paste it directly on top of everything else, and then I can just flip that back and forth. And
how do you flip that back and forth?
So with the Move tool and Transform Controls selected, up at the top in the options bar, which better.
Should always be selected.
Should always be selected. I then click on one of the edges, one of the Transform Controls, right click and flip horizontal.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to add a little bit more right to it. I really needed a little more glow around the assassin, and finally I was done. Closed it.
Woo!
Yeah. So this concludes our tutorial for making The Traveler, where we showed you guys how to light it, how to shoot it, and then
how to edit
in Photoshop and create a killer composite.
Woo!
Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, you did.
Of course you did.
All right. We're out!
Good fan.
Thank you, Cleveland.
Freaking hot.
Portland.
Where are we?
Where am I?
I don't know. How do I turn these off?